Today is September 20, 2016, afternoon work session.
Property.
This won't take long, but I wanted to address it, just, and I know I've talked to Lori about it, but, and this actually extends beyond just our campaigns. You and I have talked about kind of what our policy is as it relates to curriculum and political activity and this polarizing election that we're in as well. And I had some people ask me, and so I thought it was relevant to share. And then also just highlight, I know I get frustrated when there is either a perception or the reality that there is political or inappropriate emailing or behavior on school property, because I think it doesn't bode well for the number of people who work their tails off in this organization, and then it just doesn't give a good reflection, I think. It's on the public standpoint, and I think that and I know we send out reminders and such, but I want to make sure it's deeply rooted in the culture that it's just not the right place or tolerated accordingly. That's all, really all I wanted to say, because if I look at other, the county organizations or federal or such, in some people's cases, it's very deeply ingrained in them that it's not.
Are you talking about perhaps employees sending political jokes out or personal opinion?
I think there's a gray area, but at the same time, I don't think, actually, no, I think it should be very black and white to avoid any of those areas. And I think because everything's public record, as it should be, it puts people in a precarious circumstance that's completely avoidable. So, but that's just the high level what I wanted to talk about. I know you reminded everyone, and this year, I don't know if it was that bad, but
I didn't do any.
I just want to make sure it's just, I think we're all in agreement of the policy that we follow it, and that's, led by some example, because that's the only way that if we put in policies in place that we follow them and that we expect others to follow it, that's all.
I'd like to ask something though. Does that include emails that come into the system?
No ability
Absolutely
to
not.
control.
There's no way to control that. We're public emails. All of us are public emails. There's absolutely no way to control that, and that's, the onus is on us to not respond, forward it over to anyone else, and that's for all employees, and that's just the reality of that. But, I think when I hear people in the community frustrated talking about it, and it's a very small group, that it can taint the organization, and I just don't think it's worth it, because I think there's a lot of people who work really hard to do what they're here to do from a mission standpoint, and I just think it needs to be deeply rooted that it's absolutely not tolerated. That's all I want to say about that. And then move over to the curriculum side.
I think it was reduced, I think, to some extent this year. Although, I have some candidates, and even the Republican Party, I don't know, I'm on their email list.
No,
I don't know why.
Everybody. I feel like that's the thing. You won't be able to ever control what goes into your inbox. It's just when people, whether they had something forwarded to them or not, but take it upon their side. Just that personal, private information shouldn't be used with their school board email. That was my 2 cents, and I think it's in our policy, so we just need to make sure that that's followed.
I know I used my cell phone and was forwarding things, and it accidentally did one time. Because when you're on your cell phone, and when you're in between the two.
You gotta check your default or separate them.
Yep. And when it happened, I notified. I said, oh, I made a mistake here.
But I did want to also, in this topic, bring up the curriculum standpoint, especially with this election, because I've had a couple people ask me, and so what our policy is.
In terms of the curriculum connection, there really isn't policy that includes people from, a mock election. In fact, they have a supervisor of election even can facilitate that. So it's good educational value, but I had some concerns, particularly on the presidential election, that it might become a volatile and distracting kind of situation, because for particularly a school-wide vote. So we have discouraged that. We have not prohibited it, but we've said there's concerns, and I've conveyed that to the principals, that that is concerning to me. It is appropriate within some very specific curriculum to have a discussion about the process. And so for example, in the government class, so we have specific curriculum suggestions for teachers where there is an alignment. Here's the kinds of activities that are appropriate. I just don't want it just to be all discussion about current events, which has really little relationship to the curriculum standards, and can be fraught with some polarization of opinions and not having civil discourse. So we've put that out. I've heard of one issue where a parent felt that a teacher had, so we tracked that down, remedied that. So if there are any issues that come to our attention, because sometimes teachers or any adult doesn't leave everything at the doorway, and things creep in, and it can be perception, and we try to clear that up and make sure everybody's very cautious. This is not an appropriate forum to discuss your political views. So I think we're in a good place. Everything seems to be calm, and I'm hoping to keep it that way.
Very good.
I haven't had any about this upcoming election, but in my years here, I've had some where they said, oh, look what they're doing in this class, and I forward those to the executive director.
Yeah, but this is a pretty low-key presidential election this year.
There's a lot of middle, yeah.
Well, while we're on that, can we register voters at school?
Yeah.
We can, and we do. At our high schools, they all have student-led committees that register students to vote. The supervisor of election supports that and helps us with that. So.
Oh, and I think that's important, and I would
Absolutely.
never want to go away from that, because I
Absolutely.
think exposing them to civic duty and the process and all of that's very, very important. I think you get into hot water, and it's unfortunate because I think that current events are important, but it's murky territory.
I mean, even
depending on who's giving their opinion, and so,
yeah, the last few years, even talking about who is our president and what does that mean has become an issue. But
So.
yeah.
But I think it's relevant to talk about, because I think people have mentioned it, and I just wanted everyone to know what we do, how we handle it, and all that.
So do we actually have people at the high schools registering now?
We had more before, but then remember there was a new law in terms of
How quickly you've got to turn them in.
Well, and who, so it's been less so, but there's still information that we focus on those 18-year-olds.
Who leads that?
It's
Typically,
different at
is it
different
like
high
clubs
schools.
at the school, or?
It can be,
is it-
but.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters used to do some of it, but again, with those law changes, it's not as much.
The office did some of that too.
Yeah.
She's the supervisor of elections.
Yeah, she did, and she can facilitate that and make it easier in terms of not having the issues that the law really puts a burden. We've been cautious with staff, make sure you understand the law before you accept registrations.
Right.
But I think they're still finding ways to encourage those students that will be 18 that you need to register, and we can help you with the process.
And this was a question that came to me from the community.
Yeah, I think I had one too, and I said it's through principals. I don't have my glasses on. Oh, there they are. Well, it's blurry. It wasn't my glasses. I think it says authentic portfolios.
Right. I just wanted to have a few minutes discussion on it, what we're doing, and it really goes to the opt-out. And do we tell the teachers in the beginning of the year, in third grade, that they can use portfolios so that the kids don't have to wait till the end of the year? I like portfolios.
We have always, in this district, allowed teachers to begin a portfolio with whomever they feel it's appropriate with at whatever point. We've recommended you don't start it before the mid-year point because it is end-of-year comprehension level, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that
You have
text,
the beginning and then the end, you can see the growth.
but it's not measuring growth, that your portfolio is very specific in what is required by law. And it is not growth that you are measuring, it is meeting the standards 3 times, or be able to demonstrate evidence that the student has independently met the standard 3 times for every single standard, and you've got ranges of text of so many words and so much informational percentage, so it's very specific on what you're documenting. You're not documenting growth. You are documenting achievement, proficiency of the standard. Basically in the end of the year, although it's a level 2 equivalent, that because it's 70% is mastery, which is how they're getting into the concept that it's maybe less than what you'd expect for a level 3 type of proficiency. Regardless, we recommend if you're going to start a portfolio, you're welcome to start at any time for the second half of the year, because then students are more likely to demonstrate that level. We do, that can be embedded in their regular instruction, but it is an independent multiple choice assessment by law. I mean, so many of our classroom, even our chapter tests, if a student said, I don't understand this word, or needs help, a teacher's inclined to give them support. I mean, it's formative, it's part of classroom instruction, but this must be totally independent. So it's very important that the teacher understands whether they use our text examples that we know in cumulative will meet all the requirements, or they substitute something that they have available, which they're allowed to do, as long as it still meets all the requirements. It must be independent. And so some districts have chosen to do these little mini assessments throughout the year for all students. To me, that's just creating unnecessary assessment. The very thing you're trying to avoid by applying it to all students who may not need it at all. So we have recommended, particularly if a teacher knows that this is a student who their family has indicated they're going to opt out, they are welcome to start a portfolio, at any point. It's really, you've got plenty of time from January on. Here's the assessments. You can spread it out over time, so there's nothing that prohibits them, and in fact, it's encouraged.
What's required from our side on these portfolios? How much time is involved?
A portfolio is time intensive. It's not something you want to do in a couple of days, because it's for every standard you have to have 3 demonstrations of mastery. So if you think main idea, I have to have this many words of text, this much informational, narrative versions. It has to be a multiple choice assessment.
So
it has to be aligned.
what's the cost to the district for a portfolio as opposed, if a teacher has to spend 20 hours doing it, then...
We've got it already. The teacher doesn't have to do anything but administer if they choose to use what we know is aligned with the
they take
state.
it home and basically do it.
No, the students can, for example, let me show you how, if I was teaching, and I know this is a student we've been working on a portfolio, when it's center time in my classroom, I'm going to ask that student, I want you to come over here and answer these questions. And then they kind of tuck that in. They score it so they know, okay, I've got the 3 demonstrations of masteries, and you spread it over time. So it's not something that really is a negative impact of time on the student, but it's something you just do, okay, we're ready for this assessment. I'm going to give the student as part of their classroom instruction. So it's more of a more comfortable setting for students, because it's not like, oh, here's a test. But the teacher knows I can't help the student if they have a question on this one, that you need to try to do it the best you can and, encourage them. But it's different than how they might treat a regular classroom assignment. So you don't need to do that with all students. And if we have an indication, because they've recently added the iReady as an approved alternative assessment, if we know in looking at the score on the iReady, even that first assessment, that this is a student that's not going to have any difficulty being able to demonstrate an appropriate level of mastery using the iReady assessment that's ingrained in part of that whole system, then the teacher may say, we're going to be able to demonstrate mastery of all the standards with how the student performs on iReady, because I can already see they're above that proficiency now. So there's ways that it has gotten better so that the teacher knows who do I need to kind of start a portfolio, who doesn't need it, so that we won't have some of those issues, because no one wants to have to retain a student unnecessarily that is proficient. So we're looking for whatever measures we can demonstrate and meet the law so that we can promote those students that are able to read at the expected proficiency levels.
Some of my
So-
concern was because at the end, when we realized that some of the students were not going to be promoted to 4th grade, we were then doing a portfolio, starting a portfolio then. So how in the world do we do a portfolio from then that measures before they go to 4th grade?
It's possible. It's not the best situation because it's a lot of little mini assessments. But we do it in summer school all the time because sometimes it surprises. Sometimes you have a student that, forget the opt-out, you have a student taking the FSA, they miss it by a few points, they take the Stanford 10, they miss it by a few points, and they say, you know, this student is so close. I think on a portfolio they can demonstrate mastery, and all throughout summer they'll start it at the end of the school year, they'll complete it during summer school, and the student's good to go. So we've had, over the years, we've had those kinds of situations where, you know, that the teacher thought this was a student that could make it and just misses it by a little bit. None of the avenues that are available help a student that is truly struggling. It doesn't matter if you have a student that is truly reading below level, it doesn't matter which option you have, they're not able to demonstrate mastery. The gap is too wide. Portfolio is for a student who, for whatever reason, seems to be more comfortable with that kind of a demonstration of mastery, or it's a student that doesn't see that as so difficult as an entire test at one time. So it's spread out over time, it's short periods, and so if they have a lot of test anxiety,
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
it's a more comfortable, and we've had a few of those kids that they get so uptight about the formal test that they feel more comfortable with these little mini kind of tests that you get more rest, there's some more breaks. So it's a good option. It always has been a good option for a few students, but again, it doesn't help the student that is struggling with reading because you can't demonstrate mastery of the standards no matter which alternative you choose.
How many kids are we talking about that for one reason or another they're held back? And then how many are held back, and we're just talking 3rd grade, because they opted out versus those that one issue that might have test anxiety or that might be closer, or those that really cannot read to the level that the state is saying they should read?
I don't know for this year
Well,
of any
yes.
student that was on the opt-out that we had to retain because we didn't have any way to show evidence. That last student, with the iReady, we were able to move them forward. There are students who are at the cusp. They're not opt-out, they've taken the assessment. In fact, we just had one. It was like 2 questions on Stanford 9, 1 point on the FSA. We put the student in a 4th grade class as a 3rd grader, as required by law. We were able to meet, because you can do a mid-year promotion, we were able to demonstrate on the first assessment of the iReady that the student had met the eligibility to be a 4th grader. We made them a 4th grader. Student really didn't even see the difference. We just knew he was so close that this was a student that we needed to be in a 4th grade class. So we try to, where we see that there's a potential, they're so close, we'll put them as a 3rd grader in a 4th grade class because we believe before mid-year we can promote them to 4th grade and they're getting exposure to the 4th grade curriculum. So and those are not new things, that's always been the case because we've had those kinds of students since we had the 3rd grade retention beginning.
What percentage of our students in 3rd grade are retained in 3rd grade?
Oh, I'd have to go, I hate to quote. We're lower than the percentage. It's a double-digit percentage, but it's in the low teens, as I recall. And it's interesting. We had one parent with the iReady, that they had just met the qualifications. The parent felt strongly in that particular situation that this student needed to stay another year in third grade. And we would work collaboratively with families, and there was only one, because once we knew iReady was an option, we looked at every single student, because there was another avenue to demonstrate mastery. And in most cases, they were happy to hear it, and they moved into as fourth graders. In this particular case, the parent said, we really have talked it over, and we think this is what is best. And the school has to agree, too. Ultimately, where they meet promotion requirements, you need all sides to agree. And in this case, they did see that there was some benefit for this particular student. So we look on it on an individual basis, even if they meet promotion policy.
Okay.
Okay?
Legislative priorities.
I want to pick up where we left off before, and maybe more of a timeline of what we were thinking, and maybe lobbyists comes first. But that was more tied into the lobbyist discussion, and I think I made my point earlier today. But what would our timeline be like? What is our Sarasota legislative platform? I know we have the Tri-County, but is that all? Is that what we think is important?
We have a couple of others, really.
Well, and yeah, exactly. So opening that discussion, putting out whatever people want to have forward. I am of the impression that having it small, focused, and concise is what we prioritize.
Didn't we choose 4 or something, or?
That was not voted, but that was on the discussion with Tri-County.
We chose the ones with Charlotte and Manatee, and then the consortium. And you all got a copy of the consortiums?
No, we're going to be voting on that, aren't we?
Yeah. There's one that's a strikeout copy, there's one that's a clean copy, and there's one that's an instructional memo copy. We usually are asked to vote on that, not make any changes to it, because the consortium has to have every school district, and there are only 10 in the consortium now. Palm Beach has dropped out. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
No, anyway. So that we will be voting on next time.
Okay. Well, just as a starting point, I think it's, I would like us to really come up with, personally, I think 1 or 2 major priorities that are important to us.
We're not going to get much money this year, so why ask for money? The recess thing is a big deal. Orange County is working on that. Scott and some others have been working with the Central Florida Coalition on the.
Have you all seen the data? I'm sure you have, your badge. That was the committee, that was the presentation that was provided to the Appropriations Committee based on 70, that provision with all of the construction costs, the overages, all of that. So has everyone seen that?
No,
You mean
well, what are you
the one that
talking
was
about?
generated by the committee, or the one that was generated by superintendents calling to question?
Both, and the narrative in between it. So that has all the data backing up, and then there's a whole narrative kind of back and forth that I think is relevant when you're going back. I still told Scott I need give me hard evidence that I can support. Conceptually it makes a lot of sense to spend. If you can spend more money on the front end and save cost savings in the end, but I have to be, I think, to show attributes beyond just one, an example in 2009. I think it's worthwhile, and I don't think this is something that will change in 1 year, but I think that.
But this is why we need a lobbyist, so we work as a board, so that it's not you working with your group and us working with, we need to come up with a kind of a consensus, a central voice, if you will. I think that what Sarasota said, I'm not saying you can't work on that with other things, but I think that's one of the reasons for consolidating and having a lobbyist, is so that we do have a.
Yeah, and we can hear what the other groups are saying they're looking for, or where they're getting the pushback, and where they're thinking they're coming up with a solution. Is that really going to be a solution? Because I think what they need is some some leeway to allow us to have exemptions.
But recess is a big thing this year. Orange County is pushing it. They're working with leadership.
But I remember we did something for recess under Charlie Crist.
Well,
It
they're
was 20
looking
it was-
at
wasn't it
something
20
again. I
minutes?
guess some of that was rescinded during the
Well,
No,
you
it's
have,
30 minutes.
you
I
have
think
PE requirements that got expanded
You're right.
in terms of the number of minutes, which
Right.
was beyond even what formal PE, so that classroom teachers had to provide some PE. So this would, what other districts are now being pressured to do is to add recess as a requirement rather than an option. And frankly, I think in most of our schools, they do provide that. It becomes what is one of the concerns coming from superintendents is you have only so many playgrounds. You have these large number of minutes that you must have to meet the PE requirements. It's scheduling places, appropriate places for unstructured play, which is
And then
something
what do
that's
you
hard
do
to
when
at
it
a peak.
rains?
Well, but it's just even scheduling a playground in some of our schools becomes very difficult in making sure that you've also got that time allotted. It's one thing they've scheduled now where, because I find that there's some recess at all of our schools at the elementary level that, they squeeze it in, but having a specific number of minutes that everybody must have, then it's really becomes, for some school sites, a scheduling challenge in terms of having a playground available for students.
Well, they're talking about flexibility and to teachers' discretion, 20 minutes a day, 100
I mean, the
minutes.
whole point is to make sure children get up and are active so that
And
they
have
can
a break.
refocus.
And have a break.
Absolutely.
And
Makes
people
sense.
and children and to make sure that children are happy.
Doesn't need to be outside on a formalized playground, though. I mean, I don't know, whatever.
Well, I think it was at Finland, they have like 5 minutes every hour
Yes,
when they
to
get up and they
finish-
move.
To finish.
I did want to add to this, and so anyways, high level, if we're really discussing a lobbyist, I just really want to see a legislative platform kind of come in together, because that's really going to weigh heavy on my decision on whether I think we need a lobbyist or not, because I don't know. And then second, I wanted to update you guys on the discussion over 7029, on the capacity discussion, which the coalition had a conference call with Adam Miller of the DOE, and one of the main questions was the definition, if they're going to define capacity through the DOE, and also what if there is going to be any uniformity across state, county lines to assist. No is the final answer.
Is he still in charge of charter schools?
Yeah, now he's
Choice office.
Yeah, so that's the no right now, and essentially it came to be that it is up to the discretion of the local districts, which, coming from the Tri-County discussion, I agree that we want to, and it's not easy for me to say here because I think we do a really good job with our choice options and the way we approach, just the variety of choices per se, but there are a lot of other districts that don't do that. But whether or not we're going to have a universal at least choice window, because I don't know how that works. There's some districts that have choice the entire year. I mean, there's no set time frame, and the capacity standpoint, because our service standard is programmed, and there's some others use fish, so there's no uniformity. We wanted to basically see how it goes this year, and then, which I am not. I mean, our goal was obviously to highlight some of their concerns from a logistical, whether it's transportation, whether it's the choice, the appeal process, spending money in litigation because there's differential communication on, interpretation of it, and that's counterproductive, obviously, to spending and what we're focused on. So that was the outcome, but I think it's relevant for us to consider bringing that even forward this particular session. I think many of the people on the call agree that Sarasota County is a really good model, and maybe looking at us as a go-to. So that's just my update for you all.
I appreciate the update. That's great. I saw the call was.
Sorry, that's not, I was hoping for a little bit more definition. I didn't necessarily anticipate it, but I mean, at least it maybe says we do not have the authority to make any rules, although we've seen that that's not.
I think it's probably a good point to add something about legislative issues on our workshops in the afternoon, so we can update each other about what the associations are doing, at least through
Any
session.
discussions or anything like that, just because, yeah, so that, I wanted to make sure it's shared with you, but, fortunately, there's no movement, but looking forward, 'cause I do think that you brought up really good points that are issues that may come to play and how that relates to.
Anybody read the Miami Herald yesterday about homework, too much homework? No, just guess who I forwarded that article to? Dr. Coburn.
I was thinking about that, I guess, so.
What do you think of this? But it's the high-performing schools in Miami-Dade, and I'm here to tell you.
Your elementary
does too many, well, they do it in elementary, particularly in middle. I have a 7th grader in middle school she's just bombed with math homework, and she gets in yesterday, and she did hers, and she has swimming, so she's really has little time, and she's one of, I think, half the class that did it. The other half decided not to do it. Didn't do all their homework, but I just wonder if there's been any topic of discussion with your cabinet, Mrs. White, about the amount of homework that.
Not recently. But that is becoming a national topic. I mean, you've got schools that have declared no homework. But I will tell you, if it's, I think there's a reasonable amount of homework, and I know that there are some schools, particularly where they, Pineview has a reputation of having, and you've got individual teachers too, which sometimes it's difficult to communicate with if they're having a big project. But I will tell you, there are some real good types of project-oriented work that is very difficult to complete during the few hours that we have students. And there is, we always talk, homework is not a time to learn new skills, it's a time to practice. It's whether it's reading, or doing some additional math to make sure you have it. So it's hard, although perhaps, the research will show otherwise, it's hard for me to believe that saying, it's really important that you read 15 minutes a day at home to begin to get that habit and the discipline. So I think there's some benefits for
3-4
reasonable
hours a day,
practice.
that's a lot.
No, I agree. If it gets excessive,
That's a lot for 7th grade.
that's tremendous. But there's some reasonableness in homework that I think are beneficial, both in building that kind of time management and study skills, but also practicing skills that really students need to be practicing at home.
Owen had a math teacher who made them do the math before it was taught.
You've
and
also
then come in the next
there's
day.
reverse.
Well, that's called the flipped classroom, which is very specific. It is not for all students, but some students, and you'll see that in colleges now, they're doing more and more. So they use their class time to discuss and really work with it, not to present. So they present through videos or others where you actually learn it, or through material that they are required to do, and then you come and practice it at school. It's called the flipped classroom. And we have a few teachers that are using that as methodology, but that's not for every student.
Is that more advanced learners or
It's kind,
self-disciplined?
or students that just prefer initially learning it on their own. Even there are some adults. Let me read it all before I want to do that kind of on my own, and then I want to ask you questions. Use my time with the teacher to interact and ask questions about it after I've kind of done what I could on my own. So it's a learner preference. Certainly, I think because you're learning new things independently, that tends to be the higher performer
Is that
typically.
to the discretion of that teacher, or is it aligned with the specific?
You're still covering the standards, so it's to the discretion of the teacher. But I think when you have a teacher, and frankly, I've only seen it at the high school level right now. I don't see it for a real methodology they're doing throughout their whole course. Any teacher might do it 1 or 2 times.
Right.
But that tends to be only at the high school level. But then the guidance counselor knows this is what the teacher is doing, and so if they schedule students with knowledge of that, and that and they make adjustments in the schedule if it's not working. There's only a few examples.
I know that somebody complained about the teachers that would assign homework and then not grade it. They said, why am I doing this homework if they just take it and they just put it in the corner someplace.
Sometimes they'll just take, I know there's teachers that say, it's the doing it because it's practicing. I'm not going to grade you, except that did you try? Did you try do this practice? So it kind of depends on the point. I would hope that they would at least
they're
give
doing
them
it wrong,
credit for
hopefully.
doing it
Yeah.
as opposed to not doing it.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, let me know if I'm doing it wrong,
Right.
yeah.
Ahead of time.
Okay.
I have one other, sorry. Someone asked me about a calendar. And I meant to bring it up last, I'm fair enough, I completely forgot. So the initial question is, are we going through the whole committee
the
process
committee,
again?
it's already met.
And why are, okay. So.
And there were some people that did attend, it's been advertised.
Right.
And there was audience members at their first meeting. They're meeting all the representative requirements of your policy and the calendar committee, so that's all there. They have tentatively completed a proposal that they're going to finalize, I think, but they're pretty close on for next year. Traditionally we've done 2 years, so now they're going to try to present to the school board 2 years. They weren't able to do that last year because of some of the issues we had with one, and they weren't prepared to do then a second one after they went back to the drawing board on the first. So they're looking at presenting to you a calendar for next year and the year after. They're pretty close on next year, and they're just going to be working on the year after.
I can tell you, if it's going to be an earlier start, we're going to have a community event.
Well,
I
yeah, but okay.
The committee is aware. They will come with you with a recommendation to present and to defend of why they think this is important, and so all I can tell you is that's your policy, that's the process that is used, and then it's the decision makers.
Some people want it after.
Yeah. What about but look how many districts start earlier than we do.
We were the
in
latest.
state.
I know.
And we weren't the only one, but the latest.
I get
in the state.
feedback on that, so I don't know.
Are we going to have a follow-up next month on the workshop in regards to the bathroom issues that had been brought up at the last workshop?
I thought so. I thought it was
Mr. Hardy is going to be scheduled for a presentation in October to give you an
Okay.
update.
Are we done?
Sorry for the others, but.
So we will reconvene in an hour.